Let's bring you guys in.
Hello.
What is going on with my, there we go. Hey, everybody.
Hey, man. Good show.
I feel like we're going to hear about Pandora today.
Bob is, yeah, good. He's unmuted now. That's good.
So is that the Rudy set? That looks like that landscaping place in.
Yeah, that's what it is.
That's the place. That's the place everything important happens these days, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's the Rudy set, as you call it.
Yeah.
But
Hello, Joey.
I got to change it. I just these Monday shows creep up on me quickly. How about we just go back to some music?
Oh,
That's
cool.
good. I like that. Hey, great show today. And Bob, Joseph likes it when I show my notes. I take notes every day, and when I get excited, you get red and yellow on the notes. And so we got very excited lots of times today. Thank you for
awesome. Oh, that's great. Thank you.
I'm a philosopher, so I appreciated the depth of so many of the things you talked about today. Good stuff, as well as the drumming.
I had not anticipated when looking forward to this that I would get to perform on the drum, but
that was great. I mean, it was nice to be introduced to that instrument. I'd never seen those before.
You should look up handpan on YouTube. There are some wonderful players, much better than me.
I'll do that.
What's up, Bob? Good to see you,
Joey.
We didn't even get to talk about how San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown declared a Bob Heyman Day.
Well,
did you know that, Joey?
I did not know that.
You haven't had a day named after you yet?
Joey, you could do it the way I did it because it's incredibly anticlimactic. We had a marketing client that was an Asian American nonprofit, and they said, "We don't have any money to pay you, but we have a lot of juice with Mayor Brown. We can get you a day named after you."
So what day is actually named after you?
Well, it was. I've got the proclamation here. It was October 19th, 2000. My son, who was probably about 14 years old at the time, goes, "Well, is it going to be Bob Heyman every October 19th?" And I said, "Well, no, just this one." He said, "Well, then what's the big deal?"
What's the big deal?
That's good. I did not.
I got the same thing, Bob. One day I came back home from a speech, and the mayor of the city had given me the key to the city, and I showed it to my kids, and they said, "What's it open?" And I said, "Oh, well, nothing really." And they said, "Well, then what's the point?"
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're never a hero to your kids, I'm afraid.
Right, that's right. And the wife plays a special role in that
indeed.
program too,
indeed.
right?
Indeed, that's what wives apparently are for.
We're all heroes to our kids until they get to be older.
Until they get to be older, you're right. Then it kind of flips some way.
Yeah, my little dudes think I'm pretty awesome right now because they're 9 and 7. But wait,
enjoy it. Take videos.
Yeah,
about
it. Your time will come. Welcome to the teenage years.
Oh, I know. Especially when I can go back to work. They won't want to see me anyway.
I'm thinking Tom's story is he went the next day with a key and they changed the locks.
Right, there you go. Right,
you went to City Hall and you're like, what the hell?
All right, I get no respect.
But that's cool. I didn't realize you could actually have a day named after you, but one day. So that day
just one day. Well, they had a lot of favors to give around. You could only give one day.
You can buy stars too. Did you know that?
No.
You can there's a star registry where you can actually look up in the sky and find a star within somewhere in our
I
galaxy.
keep getting Groupon offers for an acre on Mars.
There you go.
Yeah.
You and Alana can hang out next to each other.
Joey, my grandson wants to be an astrophysicist, and for his birthday last year, we bought him a star.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome.
Oh, awesome.
That's cool.
I'd buy myself a star, but my family would never let it go. That would be the constant ridicule for the rest of my life that I bought myself a star. Now, buying somebody else a star is different, right?
Right.
I want my own though. Yeah.
Would you like me to buy you a star for your birthday, Tom?
That would be wonderful, Joseph. April 13th. April 13th.
Yeah.
Write it down.
I mean,
Now,
you know,
back
do you
to
think
Bob.
do you think I'll still be doing Corona TV April 13th?
I hope so. Back to Bob. Bob, what you said about the internet, I think was so interesting. I mean, my father built a lot of the early radio stations in the Southeast in the US in the 1940s and early 50s. And I remember when television came out, my father was so excited. He said, this could be the greatest thing that's ever happened to humanity. And then a few years later, I remember him saying, what a waste. What a waste that this wonderful medium has been just squandered. A friend of mine did a book years ago called Hamlet's Blackberry, and it was about the history of human invention and human technology from the earliest days and how things often were misused before they were properly used. And I've always hoped, I mean, in the early days of the internet, I remember with the anonymity in chat rooms and online, I remember saying to my wife, this is like heaven on earth. There's no possibility of racism or sexism or gender prejudice. You just meet people as human beings. You don't know how old they are or how poor or rich they are. It's just wonderful. And then for that to turn so quickly into the exact opposite was really a head spinning experience.
I have a sneaking suspicion that Gutenberg was disappointed in his own lifetime in what happened with the printing press.
That's probably right. And that was long before Mad Magazine, so, even in the early days, how it was used. So,
I'm also getting Groupon offers for subscriptions to Mad Magazine, which I thought had died long ago.
I thought it was gone long ago, too. It kept me going through my youth, though, through my elementary school and junior high days.
Wow, that's. I mean, the best part of that story is that it's a Groupon.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean that's almost like a bit that writes itself. I mean, it couldn't be an offer in of itself. It's like that would be second only to being on eBay with an auction with a buy it now option, right?
And speaking of a book, I have a book to recommend to all you guys today. I just read it. Somebody on Facebook asked the question, what's the greatest book you've ever read? And of course, there were answers like Don Quixote and Moby Dick and all the standards. But some guy said, Per Gorio, Built to Suck. I didn't read that far down the scroll that far down, but I'm sure somebody said that. But somebody said Per Gorgio, Balzac's novel, changed my life. And I suddenly remembered I'd bought a leather-bound copy for $4 at a library book sale years ago and had never read it. So I grabbed it off the shelf this weekend and read it. And it's the most amazing novel about human nature. There's a character in it who has the most cynical imaginable view of human nature. It's about a young man in Paris who's from the provinces, and he sees all this wealth and he sees all this glamour and all this luxury in the upper classes, and he suddenly wants to do anything he has to do to get successful, rich, accepted in society. And so a kind of a satanic figure, at the crossroads figure from the blues song comes to him and says, hey, I'll tell you how to do it. And it's the most cynical view of human nature. It like takes Hobbes to a deeper, darker level. Wow. And to read the novel, though, and to look at the current use of the internet, the current problems in our democracy, the current, the state of our society, and you get some of the good and some of the evil. It was just a great novel. So I mentioned it to you guys because it's probably not on anybody's reading list.
How do you spell it?
It's called Per, like father, P-E-R-E, Gorgio, G-O-R-G-I-O, I think is the spelling. And it's Balzac, Honoré de Balzac, the great French writer. It came out in 1835, and it's set in Paris in 1819. And, you know, he's one of these guys who gives you lots of physical detail. It's about a boarding house in a poor section of Paris. And he describes that for the first 20 pages. And you're saying to yourself, come on, where's the story? But when the story happens, it's unbelievable. It's Balzac's most famous novel, it turns out, and for good reason. If you want to really immerse yourself into some philosophical conundrums about what real human nature is, it's a great story for that.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
There's Mr. Garfield. I forgot to actually mention on the show that Steve Garfield is our Snopes, and sometimes he uses Snopes to just fact check all and sundry. So who needs technology? Just everyone needs a Steve Garfield, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
I suspect that Socrates and Plato would not be surprised with what's happened with the internet. I mean, people who are actually, however far back they go, human nature will not be a surprise.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing because you get the glory and the gruesomeness, you know, and that's the thing about a Jewish theology and Christian theology has always had one foot on each side of the divide. There's a glory, like Pascal said, there's a greatness to human nature and there's a wretchedness to human nature. And you see both in the internet. You see our greatness in how the internet is used for wonderful things. And you see the wretchedness and how it's used in the most terrible of ways. So it's kind of interesting.
You know, I had an interesting thought just now, which is, in many respects, if you study history, as most of us have, and you even look at the premise of the rise and fall of civilizations and dynasties and corporations, and just the life cycle of an idea or a concept. I think the very thing that I basically labeled and pointed my finger at with respect to corporations, which is size, scale, economies of scale, is really the problem that the internet is going through right now. It's the fact that in the early days, there were very few people that even discovered this little jewel, and it's not that we even kept it under wraps. It's not even that we were good or bad or evil. It's just that there weren't enough of us. And what's really happened now is, because of critical mass and because of scale, that's where everything goes pear-shaped, right? When you get too big to fail, that's what's happened. And it's because, I mean, I even remember, Joey, going back to, I remember with Crayon, my first agency, and we used to say to our clients, we've got good news and bad news for you. Well, the good news is your consumers aren't on Twitter or on the internet. The bad news is the journalists are. So all it took during those days was, remember the Comcast technician that fell asleep on someone's couch?
Bob Garfield.
What?
That was Bob Garfield's couch.
Was it really?
Yeah, he wrote a huge. That's why Comcast must die was the hashtag he wrote after that. And he
I think it's a different. I think it's a slightly different story. But I remember Comcast must die. But what I was saying is, it just took a moment that had no reach per se, but someone who put that on Twitter, and then, if a journalist was, I don't want to use the word trolling, but if a journalist was following the influencers or following the conversation, what is now essentially Reddit, they would just pick up story ideas. And so what we called Twitter at the time was a reach amplifier. There was no reach on Twitter at the time. It wasn't being used as a broadcast medium by celebrities and, these days, clearly the president of the United States. You don't get bigger than that. And I just think maybe the ills of the internet right now, or the growing pains, maybe it's a better way to think about it, right? Because it's not exactly like, 60 years, it's still young enough. Social media is still young enough that maybe growing pains is a better way to describe. that really what's happening is it's just its size and scale that is biting us in the butt, because with something that is too big also comes the inability to manage and moderate and control it.
Yeah. So beware, Corona TV. Enjoy these early days of small, wonderful reach, because, you know.
Yeah. Don't wish that on me. Wish me some reach, please.
Two thoughts. One is, I forget which comic it is, but there was a line about that restaurant's gotten too popular. Nobody goes there anymore.
Yeah.
Yogi Berra.
Yogi Berra, right.
But the earliest online community, even predating the internet as we know it, was the Well, and Whole Earth Electric Link. And I remember the biggest complaint people had with the Well was too much bandwidth is being devoted to the Grateful Dead.
I'll tell you, David Meerman Scott would approve, because he's a bit of a deadhead. But
It's fun.
yeah, no, I mean it's very accurate and very true and very appropriate, which is always being able to balance, the purity and the idealism with the practical, tactical, and the commercial side of it. It always comes down to the commercial side of it. It always comes down, even if you go back again to the social dilemma, it's advertising at the root of the evil.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And again, maybe it's unfair to be able to say it's advertising per se, but it's really, maybe advertising just seems to take the title of scapegoat because it sits on the bottom of the trust barometer along with used car salesmen, politicians, and sorry to say, lawyers, not music lawyers, but lawyers.
Yeah.
One of the things that the internet essentially put out of business is music lawyers, because the musicians, I'm glad I got out of the music law business, because the internet essentially killed people paying for music.
Yeah. Something nobody really saw coming.
No,
again,
not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. Most of the, it's like the Talib book, Black Swan. Most of the big things nobody sees coming. The big transformational changes, which is ironic, because you think a big target flying through the sky in your direction, everybody's going to see it coming. But no, it's quite the opposite.
No, exactly.
It's very interesting. Bob, something interesting about your background at Harvard. You say you were there for a year program or a 2-year program?
1-year program.
A 1-year program. So many of the creative, inventive, prominent people I've met in my life across industries had some brush with Harvard University. And I say that with great regret, having spent 6 years at Yale. But my son went to Harvard for a year on a special program. And I told him, I said, the people you meet, the other students you meet, will be as important to the rest of your life, maybe much more important than the professors. And that kind of turned out to be true. He had a wonderful year there.
No, truly, if you can graft yourself onto the family tree, which was sort of what I was trying to do, it works out. But also, an awful lot of people who were involved with the Harvard Lampoon went on to major careers in show business.
My son is a filmmaker and a winemaker, and he as a sophomore was picked. They do the big film club at Harvard, which overlaps with the Lampoon people. They do a movie a year, and it's usually a senior's movie script, and a senior directs. But they asked my son as a sophomore. They picked his script and asked him to direct, and so
awesome.
his actors were Lampoon guys, and the guy who went on to write The Office, and another guy who went on to win The Great Race on ABC around the world. And his third actor in his romantic comedy was Larry Summers, the president of Harvard that year.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so as a sophomore, he was in Summers' office saying, "No, don't touch that. No, don't move your head that way."
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Experience, yeah. So
Colin Jost was also there. Did you guys know that? Colin Jost was the head of the Lampoon at Harvard. The guy on SNL.
Wow.
I was just thinking, Joey, where did I hear the story of someone who, and it was Colin Jost on Howard Stern talking about his experience, but also he was rejected several times. But it was like the ultimate he just kept on coming back until eventually I think they hired him.
Yeah, yeah. That's a story. That's a story about people. I just read the history of the New Yorker, you know, the guy who started it, Harold Ross, in 1925. Amazing how many famous authors and famous artists were turned down 20 or 30 times by the New Yorker before their first piece was accepted. And so many young people nowadays give up after the first rejection or the second rejection. They say, okay, I guess this is not for me.
Yeah, yeah.
J.D. Salinger among them.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Yeah. And then he became a monthly writer. So
yeah. Pretty incredible.
Well, this was, I mean, this was to me like just, I felt like I just wanted to sit back and just listen to more of these interesting stories. But it's just, and it just makes me, it really does make me feel quite nostalgic as I'm sandwiched by Steve Garfield and Bob Garfield. brothers from another mother, no doubt. But I do, you know, I just think back. That's why I loved showing that, you know, old school websites, and I just remembered. You remember those days, Joey, right at the beginning.
Yep, that's where they basically took print and moved it over to web copy.
That was it.
Yeah.
And considered innovative. That was considered a big innovation. Right?
Yeah, and they took small tiles and they put them on, you know, banner ads. So we just kind of transferred everything over.
But clickable print, right? Clickable print with hyperlinks, which was actually quite revolutionary. Yeah. I mean, it was game changing, you know, and of course the whole idea with the link or the hyperlink is, you know, you could just jump from pillar to post and go down rabbit hole after tangent after, and you never knew where you might end up.
No.
I mean, it was trees upon branches, and that was just game changing in terms of how we read.
I had a designer who was ahead of his time who did my first website in 1995. And I was still figuring out what all this stuff was. We won a badge on our website from USA Today. They called us one of the top 100 sites on the web. I was so proud until I found out there were 105 sites on the web at that point, but still, we were in the top 100. And it was, you know, we proudly displayed the badge on the website, but it was in the day when stuff like that, I mean, the innovations, the good designers, and I had a guy who designed the electronic architecture of the site himself. And the good thing was we were way ahead of the curve. The bad thing was anytime I wanted to put a short blog post on the website, I had to say, Dennis, could you post this for me? You know, it was that kind of thing.
Hey, Joseph.
Yeah.
You bring up the early days of the internet and the hyperlinks and everything. So I was really immersed in this whole thing as a founder of the Boston Computer Society Macintosh Users Group.
Really?
And so when the Macintosh came out, I was the meeting coordinator, and we had monthly meetings, and I would bring in people from, you know, all around the world talking about the newest Macintosh stuff. And this one meeting that I'll never forget, we had Brown University come in, and they figured out how to hook up the original Macintosh to a laser disc player. And in the laser disc player, they put Romeo and Juliet. And what they showed on stage was, like, say a query of some text, and they would key it into the Mac, and then that scene would come up on the laser disc in the auditorium, and it had hyperlinks in the text, and it brought up the video on the laser disc, and that was, you know, it was amazing when that happened.
What year was that, Steve?
Right, 1984, 85.
Good. That's amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible.
We also had Ray Kurzweil come, and he hooked up a synthesizer, and he said that was the most expensive add-on to the Macintosh. And he was playing music, and he had musical notes on the Mac hooking up to the synthesizer. And oh my God, the stuff that was happening was just way ahead.
Yeah.
I love these stories of wonder. I mean, I have my own little personal one. I was in Moscow, of all places, the only time I've ever been there, and I was delivering a series of workshops to Coca-Cola. And I went in, and in the middle of my session, I said, watch this. And I went to Twitter and I said, call this number now. That's all I said on my post. Just call this number now. And the number was my Skype in number. By the way, we're talking, I don't know, 2006, maybe, really? 2005. I think my first book had just come out. And the next thing, just my Skype just starts ringing, and I'm just answering the phone, and I've got it on speaker, and I'm like, hey, who's this? And I'm like, someone's from New Zealand, and someone's from Cape Town, and someone's from New York, and someone's from like, where you from? Like, I'm in London, and then in some cases it might have been, oh, it's Steve Garfield from stevegarfield.com, and but most of the time they were just people who were following me. And I just remember the look on people's faces. How is it possible that you could just write this number, call this number on this small little platform, and the world suddenly is just coming to you? And I must have answered about 15, 16, 17 phone calls or Skypes at the time. And you could just see all the light bulbs. And that's the word, right, Steve, right? It's wonder and awe. That's what we need back.
And Joseph, what I love about that story is it's so humbling for me, because I know at the same time I could have put my number on Twitter and there would have been thunderous silence. It would have been a great way to do a meditation each day.
That's what would happen. That's what would happen now if I just said, call this number now. And now with my 22,000 followers on Twitter, at the time I probably had 3,000 or 2,000 or whatever. But that's the point. The point is, right now, the word, it is the battle between depth and relationships and connection and community and engagement, and this broadcast shotgun spray and pray, one size fits all, one too many. And right now it's the latter approach that has won and been victorious over the former. What we need to do is get back the former, the wonder, back into the internet and back into social media.
And what would be that now, I wonder, or what would be that tomorrow or next year? I wonder what the new wonder is going to be. What's the next time that we'll have that sensation Steve had, or that sensation the people in your room had? What's the next thing coming? Or is it the black swan we can't see?
No, it's definitely Parler. I'm kidding.
That's exactly what I was thinking. We're speaking today about great stories from the past.
Yeah.
But who wants to play futurist for the day and maybe give an opinion?
Yeah. What do you guys think? What's next?
Listen, but Bob knows the answer. He's just not telling. Just for the record.
No, it's going to be a big black swan. No, I wish I knew. I don't see it, but I think that's the nature of things. It doesn't look to me to be something that's what the internet will change into. It's going to be something that's in a lab somewhere right now.
Yeah, it's probably right. And it'll be a serendipity for those who are involved. I like it that word came up today, because it's come up many times on this show since I've been involved since July. The concept of serendipity. And the question as to whether a lawyer, a friend wrote me a note this weekend. He was in Aruba and getting ready to come back to North Carolina. And he was reading one of my novels. I've written novels for younger readers too, Bob. They kind of encompass the ages, but he was reading one of the novels where I talk, the characters talk about what I call the proximity principle. The history of human innovation seems to have involved, up until now, human beings together in physical proximity. Whether you go from the philosophers in Athens, through the Royal Society in London, through the Renaissance, through the Impressionists, Hemingway and his buddies in Paris cafes, the Los Alamos Project, the tech guys in Silicon Valley. And he was asking the question, what's what's a pandemic doing to that? Is there a version of that today? Can the internet, can Zoom, can Skype? You know, he was making this point to me. The only alternative 100 years ago to physical proximity was a letter or maybe a phone call 50 years ago.
Yeah.
He said, now you lost so much in just reading what other people thinking about what you were thinking about, reading what they were saying, the words on a page, or even the telephone, the voice. You lacked so much that we're getting with Zoom right now. We can see each other, our gestures, our facial expressions. Is that enough to bridge the gap to physical proximity? Or are we necessarily losing something right now? What do you think, Bob?
I think something, some kind of psychic connections without wires, but without proximity.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I mean, everybody names companies after Tesla, but Tesla had this whole idea of transmitting energy without wires that we still haven't gotten to. I think something must be in the lab or that'll really just make everybody's jaw drop. But
I'll offer up just one like practical idea and one more conceptual thought. The practical idea, I remember, I want to say that I was maybe at a TechCrunch Disrupt or somewhere, and it could have been years and years ago, and I don't even remember if it was a TechCrunch or it could have been like a small like pitch type of environment, and the product was some kind of a cane for people that were sight impaired or even blind. And not only did the cane actually, through proximity and through, radar and whatever technology, allow it to essentially allow the person to navigate, to be able to get a sense as to where objects were, left, right, in front, behind, etc., not dissimilar to what Tesla's doing. But there was even this idea of social networking, which is to actually let people know who was in the room. So it wasn't even as much about navigating obstacles as much as it was to be able to tell the person who was there, and today, I guess, the equivalent of their LinkedIn profile, so that they actually could network on a level playing field. Now, we've never seen any of those products being brought to the market, but it's using technology and using the functionality of both hardware and software to, I think, restore the internet to where it should have been, which is the leveling of playing fields. We always thought of the leveling of playing fields as David versus Goliath, but it's really not just about David slaying Goliath. It's about people being able to actually coexist, on that. It doesn't even have to be a playing field, just on a field. The other thought that I have for you is, I see maybe conceptually the model, which is, and I've always said this when I talk to clients, is how do we take the best of the old and combine it with the best of the new, and then create some kind of an offering that never sells out or forgets humble roots and origins. So even what you said jokingly about CoronaTV, it's exactly the point. Right? It's what I think. It's my thought process, which is, how do I build something which builds, which grows, but never sells out?
Right.
How do you grow something that never loses the intimacy? And it's kind of what I was saying to someone the other day, which is, if I would ever have an agent or a manager or someone that represents me, my mandate to them was, if you ever refuse me to come on their show or their podcast, I will fire you on the spot. Like, I will do every single person's show in the world if I can, even if it's just 5 minutes.
Right.
But that's what happens. What happens is, as we grow up, as we grow out, as we mature, as we get more money, as we, age, from being a kid when all possibilities are open, to being able to perform the way society or corp com or legal affairs expects you to. That's when it all goes to hell in a handbasket. And I think maybe that's the model, is how do we create, again, just to not make it too conceptual, this would have been, and you've heard me say this before, this would have been Twitter back in the day saying, these are the things we will never do. These are the things we will absolutely do. These are the things we might do. This is Twitter saying, if you get big or beyond a certain size, you cannot use this as a broadcast platform, or you have to conform to a bunch of other rules or guidelines.
Right.
You know, something quite practically like fact checking, right? Which is, you cannot just use this as a Twitter was never meant and built to be a broadcast platform because of its immediacy and speed. And so, sorry, go.
No, I was just saying, you're pointing out something that has such universal reach. The point you've just made about the best of the old and the best of the new. Well, that's where in politics, that's where conservatism and liberalism are supposed to come together. Conservatism wants to preserve the best of the old, and liberalism wants to grasp the best of the new. And that's a word I brought up once on this after show, heterosis from botany. It's when you breed hybrids, plants, and heterosis is gaining the strength of each without the strengths of both without the weaknesses of either. Heterosis. So the best of the old, best of the new. When Twitter was young, I was on Twitter at a time when I had 2 followers, and there was a stream you could click on Twitter that said everybody. And that would just, as fast as you refreshed it, it was just people from all over the world talking. You had access to that. And I had such a group of people that we philosophized together on Twitter for hours every day. And 2 of my followers insisted it be turned into a book. And they said they would, I didn't want to do that, but they said they would write the forwards. And it was Mariel Hemingway, the actress, and Kathy Ireland, the former Sports Illustrated model, who has a big company now. And so just for the kick of getting them to write forwards, I did the book. But that doesn't happen on Twitter anymore. I haven't seen anything remotely like that on Twitter in recent years, because it has changed. It has morphed from what it was to what it is now. And you're right.
We can get back there. And so, for example, one of the ideas that I've had, and I certainly think politicians, it's an idea that I had for Hillary, back when, and it's an idea for any candidate, quite frankly, which is 5 minutes a day. Just 5 minutes a day, just randomly, just respond to people on Twitter, right? On your feed or people that follow you. It's surprise and delight. It's the serendipity of it, and that's what and I still wonder why, why celebrities don't do that today. Why they don't just take 10 minutes a day just to be the wonder and awe of being able to just go and say, who's saying nice things about me right now and who's saying bad things about me right now? Well, let me surprise the people that say they love me by saying, I love you back, man. And the people that hate me by saying, I love you back, man. And just being able, you can imagine 5-10 people a day, their lives could be forever changed by going, oh my God, you will never believe what just happened. It's the equivalent, quite frankly, it's the equivalent of someone calling in to a show, to a show, or, and being able to go like, oh my God, is that, ironically, Howard Stern, he does the exact opposite because he's just an innovator and a disruptor and brilliant at that. And he prank calls all these small internet shows. But in doing that, he's actually giving them the greatest gift ever, because when it does come and transpires that you just got pranked by Howard Stern,
right?
It's
like a story forever, right?
Right, and it could never be the other way around. It could never be legitimately, hi, I'm from the Howard Stern Show, just calling to ask you a serious question. Why would you be on the, on the reincarnated canine internet, radio show?
And see, Bob and I have one thing in common here. We're always trying to fact check people who are going wrong on the internet. And it never, like Bob said, it never works. It reminds me of a scene in The West Wing, you know, the old political TV show, where a guy's at his computer and he's so intent on his computer. And his assistant says, "Come on, you're late. We got to get to this meeting." He said, "No, somebody said something really wrong on the internet." Oh, this is good. Are you? Yeah, someone is wrong on the internet. I love that. Steve Garfield. Look what he's showing. It's a scene out of The West Wing. I can correct this guy. Just give me another minute. I'll show him the error of his ways. It never happens. And Joseph, what you're talking about is being like the fairy. All these people of prominence could be fairy godmothers on the internet and use it to sprinkle some stardust. I love your phrase, surprise and delight. It sure beats shock and awe with the bombs we drop on each other on social media.
I love that.
Let me ask you guys this. I was talking to my publicist and my executive coach about where I'm going to put my stuff, right? And I said, I can't go on Twitter because it's venom. I can't handle it. Me personally, and this is just me, I'm so sensitive to criticism, right? And if someone says, you know, I don't like the way Joey thinks, that's okay. I'm cool with that. But if someone says, I hate the fact that Joey wears a hat every day, right? That's the kind of criticism that I'll be like, oh, come on. I'll never wear a hat with hair this great. So why would you criticize me if you're having a hat on, right? So he asked me, what are you going to do? And I said, well, where do I go? And we're going on to Instagram and to LinkedIn. That's it. And the reason for that, as I've started to find out, I didn't have an Instagram account until this year. So I logged into one. And I think, Tom, you've seen me on it. And so I post pictures of my children, and I post pictures of Buddha, and I post nice things. And this is how I feel today. LinkedIn, if you get on LinkedIn and you start going off on politics, people ask you to leave.
Yeah, right.
So what is the difference between those two platforms? Is it self-governed? Because those two platforms are very different than Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you guys are experts. What do you think? Because it blew me away where I'm like, I can live on those two platforms because there's no venom. And people will actually, whether they know this or not, they'll say, I'm so sick of Facebook, I'm leaving, I'm going to Instagram. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, Facebook owns Instagram, but it's a different feeling.
It's almost as if Instagram is about lifestyles and LinkedIn is about business, and the other two are about anything goes.
Me, Steve.
Right? Yeah, there you go.
Joey, we will continue to discuss this topic, and I'm happy to help you on this one too. But just remember that soliloquy on criticism, you know, which you actually realize is not about you at all. It's all about them, you know.
Correct.
And the fact that they've taken the time to actually tell you what they think, and ultimately, you know, the art is 50% of the. Imagine that. Of all the criticism that you get, constructive or otherwise, imagine that 50% of the time it's absolutely truthful and accurate and helpful, and 50% of the time it's not. And the art is in being able to determine and discern when to listen and when to ignore politely and respectfully. But, you know, one of the things I did in that initial, that was Jan, you know, Jan Zlotnick criticizing the fact that he didn't like my Spider-Man t-shirt. You know, but what I realized is he felt comfortable enough to tell me that. Yeah. And that's an amazing thing because as I wrote in the soliloquy, what if he was right? You know, like what is more harmful to me, hearing that criticism or not hearing that criticism and continuing to wear the Spider-Man shirt? Yeah. You know, but it begins by me saying, I suck at it, I hate it, I'm terrible at it, and I'm never going to be good at it.
I'm actually talking about the fact that Twitter is no longer respected. Yeah. Right? If you get on Twitter and you get, like, as an example, as opposed to talking about your Spider-Man shirt, they're anti-Semitic threats. That's what I'm talking about. It's just crazy stuff. It's not like, you know.
I think Twitter's done. I mean, I think Twitter's done. I think Twitter's done. It's a terrible
platform. It's just terrible. I won't have anything to do with it.
I think it's done because it's lost the. It doesn't actually have a central operating system that allows it to function properly. Back to what Tom was.
Perfect example. So, what is the CPU of Instagram versus Twitter? And what is the difference? Is it self-governed? Because I've never seen the venom on Instagram. I don't.
No,
see
it's
that.
visual. It's just visual. It's a picture's worth 1,000 words. So,
But do people tell you to get off Instagram if you start going crazy on it? Like if you're a crazy woke liberal or if you're a crazy right wing person, I don't see either side of that on there.
No, because
cool.
because I think people just ignore the comments, because again, what happens is
But it's the people then. That's what I'm trying to get at. It's different. It's a different.
No, but
place,
but
right?
like, for example, I'm a huge English football fan, as you know, and so like for every, if Spurs win, and you just really go all the way down the comments, 50% of the comments are going to be, "You guys suck. You're the worst in the world," and 50%
right,
of the
but that's
time,
fun. That's dudes ripping on dudes.
yeah, but I'm giving you an example.
example.
But I'm giving you an example. But if it's something that is political or vulnerable, etc., look, you can also turn comments off.
I've seen that. Ryan Holiday,
Sure.
the guy who had 3 or 4 successful books about Stoicism recently, who lives in Austin, Texas. Right up to the election, he was posting some kind of politically relevant posts, and in the comments, there were some pretty nasty comments, and this is on Instagram. But the nastiness is never up front. The nastiness is never a primary post. It's like 10 down in the comments, guy, dude, I used to think you were a good guy. You're a douchebag, in the comments, or you're profanity laden. Yeah, but it's way down in the comments, and Ryan doesn't answer any of those. So he probably doesn't even look at it.
I think that's kind of what I'm looking for, because I'm new to it. And then LinkedIn, I don't see that either.
You don't see it in LinkedIn. It's very, very rare.
Yeah, you don't see people going off on each other. They may disagree on something business, but I think it's because you have to have your name attached, right?
Yeah.
Instagram doesn't. You can make up your own name. But on LinkedIn, it's your business, it's your life, it's your actual financial lifeline. So I think you're not going to go out and say, I hate every Jew or I hate black people.
If somebody
because
if somebody goes a third of the way there,
But you're not against the Jews today, Joey.
Place,
Leave the Jews alone, Joey.
Leave the Jews.
You're making me self-conscious now.
I see. Well, I mean, that's the whole thing about the anti-Semitic stuff that happens on Twitter. That's my point. I just read a big article about it, and it was bad.
But remember, you got to go back and you got to almost think, from like an ethnographic. You got to go back and just study the history and the origins and the evolution or the devolution. What Twitter was and what it became are two different things, right? I said, and I've written, I gave you the reach amplifier story today, but I used to say Twitter should be acquired by the United Nations, because Twitter is a public service. Twitter was what people, the story of Twitter was the story of the Arab Spring. The story of Twitter was what you do when the shit hits the fan and when planes are flying into buildings, right? I mean, that was a little bit before. But the story of Twitter then became the potential of, oh my God, this is the greatest customer service platform ever created. But of course, what became of Twitter was, let's monetize it through promoted posts and promoted tweets and the advertising. So advertising always comes in and perverts and pollutes the water. And then it just became a mouthpiece for celebrities and for reach.
This is the shape, right? This is the shape. My fingers up here are the Arab Spring with Twitter, right? And it went up and up and up and got to that. Oh, wow, what a great thing. And then down the other side. Is everything in the world like a hill, so that if it improves and gets better, it's eventually going to get worse? Or is there anything that can just keep getting better?
No, but that's the analogy is jump the shark, right? So I mean, not everything has to jump the shark, but then again, everything has to jump the shark when there is an inevitable life. So if you look at an inevitable life cycle, we all are born, we all die, and that's about as true as anything. Then yes, there is that moment. It's the same in a series, which is, as much as we love and want the series to continue forever, there is a moment where, Friends or Cheers or Seinfeld or whatever jumps the shark, and you're like, it took a turn. We couldn't sustain it. We couldn't refresh it, etc. But I don't think it has to be that. I mean, I think it has to, but I believe my thesis, as you know, from getting to know me, Tom, is it's all about size. Size is the great, leveler.
Well, the
In this case.
dinosaurs are the great example of that, right? The dinosaurs.
Well, how about the iPhone? How about the iPhone 12, Tom? It's back to small.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They now have the Max and the Mini.
Because
they've
they were
actually
getting
gone.
so
They've
right.
gone back. They've gone back to a smaller phone, and so they think, wax and wane. That's the universe supposedly does the same thing over billions of years. But I think that I'm just baffled by the. I'm just baffled by the venom out there.
Yeah.
I'll give you I'll give you an.
Joey, don't you think that, and you're probably surprised that I'm the one that's saying this, that the demise of Twitter is possibly due to this last 12 months of Trump being on Twitter and getting answers and getting arguments and just falling right into the toilet, and mainly because of him.
I would think that he had a lot to do with the last 4 years specifically, because he has 80 million followers, and I think that he is the fire. I mean, he was the gas on that fire. The fire existed before, but I think you're right, Stephen. I think
but
something to do with that.
But it's a good example, and let me explain to you why you're right. Is because what Trump did is exactly he took the advice that I was giving today, unbeknownst, right? Which is he was spending time following and looking at other people's feeds. And it was the retweet. It was the callous official retweet that created. And what he did was, and this is as psychological and behavioral as it is anything. What he did was he gave voice and validity and credibility to them, which allowed them to grow, but also gave him fresh content. He was the master user of Twitter. There will never be another user of Twitter like him. And you have to say, credit, discredit, whatever you want to call it. But what will transpire when the history books are written is the retweet is what did Twitter in. Yeah, and think about that, Tom. I'm going to let you stew on that for a second. What would the Stoics have said about the equivalent of the retweet?
Retweet.
Well, guys, think of
That's
this.
Your homework. That's your homework.
Twitter actually released something yesterday that said they do not pull accounts for world leaders, current world leaders. So the reason that they have not shut off Trump's account is because he was a current world leader. On January 21st, he's no longer a current leader. And is it newsworthy? Do you guys think they'll cut him off?
Oh, interesting.
I don't know. Can you tweet from Leavenworth?
Yeah. Well, I'm with you, Bob. I think he's going to prison, but I'm saying that
I'm going to give Bob Heyman the final word. By the way, this is 53 minutes, which means tomorrow's after show will only be 7 minutes. You bastards! Look at what you've done to me, Bob. I gotta say, the show was an absolute gift and a pleasure and an honor. The after show conversation, which the puppeteer, the master puppeteer, you pulled the strings, and this has been one of the most, I think, one of the most insightful conversations we've ever had on the after show. And it's all your fault.
As if. I think you're the master puppeteer for sure, but I thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for everything.